Welcome back. If you're new here, pull up a blanket, find a comfortable position, and let the night do its thing. You don't need to focus. You don't need to remember any of this. All you have to do is listen and let the words carry you somewhere warm and familiar. Tonight, we're going deep into the world of Fire-type Pokémon. 160 facts, stories, and hidden details spanning every generation, from the crackling embers of Kanto to the volcanic heights of Paldea. We're going to take it slow. There's nowhere to be and nothing to do, just the soft glow of imaginary flames and the quiet hum of a world built from wonder and light. Part 1. The Birth of Flame. Why fire exists in Pokémon at all. Fire is one of the oldest elements in human storytelling. Long before anyone dreamed of Pokeballs or Pokédexes, our ancestors gathered around open flames and told stories in the dark, using the warmth and danger of fire to explain the world around them. They built myths about fire-breathing creatures, divine birds that carried the sun across the sky, and fox spirits that could breathe the blue core of a flame that had no warmth. When Satoshi Tajiri and Ken Sugimori sat down in the late 1980s to design what would eventually become Pokémon, they reached instinctively for these same ancient archetypes. Fire was not just a type, it was a philosophy. It was the first thing humanity ever tamed, and the one thing that never quite lets itself be fully controlled. The very first concept for Pokémon, still called capsule monsters at the time, was pitched to Nintendo in 1990. In the booklet that Tajiri and Sugimori presented, there were sketches of creatures locked in battle, a vision of insects and animals turned into something almost mythic. Fire was baked into the DNA of the concept from the very beginning. The reason is simple and almost poetic. Tajiri's childhood obsession was bug collecting. He grew up in a Tokyo suburb that was being slowly swallowed by urban development, and he remembered the ponds, the fields, and the forests of his youth with a kind of grief that never really left him. He wanted to capture that feeling of discovery, that sense that something wild and extraordinary might be hiding just out of sight. Fire Pokémon, in that original vision, represented danger. They represented the line between wilderness and something you could never fully tame. When the game's type system was being developed, fire was chosen as one of the 3 starter types alongside water and grass. This decision was deliberate and elegant. It built a simple triangle that even a very young player could understand instantly. Fire beats grass beats water beats fire. 3 elements, 3 paths. A choice that would define your whole adventure before it even began. The developers understood that the first decision a player makes, choosing their starter, should carry emotional weight, and nothing carries emotional weight quite like fire. Fact number 1. Fire was one of the original 15 types introduced in Pokémon Red and Green in Japan in February 1996. But the type chart at that time included 15 types rather than today's 18. The 3 types added later, Dark, Steel, and Fairy, were not yet part of the picture. Fire occupied a smaller world back then, defined by just 5 offensive moves in Generation 1. Ember, Fire Blast, Fire Punch, Fire Spin, and Flamethrower. Fact number 2. In Generations 1 through 3, every single Fire-type move was classified as a special attack. This meant that a Pokémon's special stat, which in Generation 1 handled both special attack and special defense as a single number, determined how much damage a fire move dealt. The physical and special split that most players take for granted today didn't happen until Generation 4 in 2006. Before that, a high special stat was everything for fire types, which is part of why the early fire-type Pokémon tend to skew toward that side of their stat distribution. Fact number 3. Fire-type Pokémon are notoriously rare in the early stages of every Pokémon game. The developers do this on purpose. Choosing the Fire-type starter is often the only way to have reliable Fire-type coverage in the early game. This scarcity is a design decision, not an oversight. By making Fire types harder to find in the wild, Game Freak reinforces the emotional investment a player has in their starter. Your Charmander, your Cyndaquil, your Torchic, these feel special because they're among the very few flames burning in your party. The developers understood that rarity creates attachment. Fact number 4. As of the most recent generation, there are approximately 90 or more Pokémon that are Fire-type in at least one of their forms, including regional variants, Mega Evolutions, and alternate forms. That makes Fire type the seventh most common type in the entire franchise, tying with Poison. It accounts for roughly 8 to 9% of all Pokemon. When you look at just the early games, Fire type had perhaps 12 fully unique Pokemon in Generation 1. The type has grown enormously, but that original scarcity still defines how many players feel about these creatures. Fact number 5. Generation 5, which covers Pokemon Black and White released in 2010 and 2011, introduced more Fire-type Pokemon than any other single generation. When you include alternate forms like Heat Rotom and Zen Mode Darmanitan, Generation 5 added 17 Fire types. This was partly intentional. The designers had noticed that Fire type had remained underpopulated relative to other types for too long, and they made a conscious effort to fill in those gaps with creative designs. Fact number 6. Generation 4, which covers Diamond and Pearl released in 2006, introduced the fewest Fire-type Pokemon of any generation, adding only 6 when you count Arceus with a Flame Plate. The Sinnoh Pokédex in the regional game was notoriously lean on Fire types. Only 2 evolutionary lines, the Chimchar line and the Ponyta line, were originally available in the regional Pokédex without transferring from other games. Players who didn't choose Chimchar as their starter often struggled to fill out a Fire-type slot on their team. Fact number 7. The Fire-type, tied with the Dragon-type, has the fewest non-damaging moves of any type in the entire game, just 3. Those non-damaging Fire-type moves are Will-O-Wisp, the status move that inflicts a burn, Sunny Day, which intensifies harsh sunlight, and Flame Charge's lesser-known cousin territory when it comes to setup moves. This reflects something philosophically consistent about Fire-type Pokemon. They are meant to be offensive. They attack, they press forward, they burn. Fact number 8, Fire-type Pokemon are completely immune to being burned. This might seem obvious, but the implications are actually quite significant in competitive play. The burn status condition halves a Pokemon's physical attack and chips away at their health each turn. Being immune to that mechanic means Fire-type Pokemon can switch in on predicted Will-O-Wisp or Scald without fear. A quality that makes certain Fire types very useful as pivots against opponents who lean on status conditions as a primary strategy. Fact number 9. During harsh sunlight, Fire-type moves deal 50% more damage. During rain, Fire-type moves deal 50% less damage. During the extremely heavy rain, created by the ability Primordial Sea, all Fire-type moves fail entirely. This weather interaction is one of the core tensions of the Fire type. Fire types thrive in conditions that mirror their nature: hot, dry, bright, and wither in conditions that oppose them. The relationship between sun and rain teams has defined competitive Pokemon for decades, with Fire types sitting at the center of that friction. Fact number 10. The move Burn Up, introduced in Generation 7, causes the user to lose their Fire typing after using it. It deals powerful Fire-type damage, but the trade-off is that the Pokemon using it becomes whatever secondary type it has, or becomes typeless if it was a pure Fire type. Only Fire-type Pokemon can use Burn Up to begin with. It's a self-sacrifice mechanic, thematically resonant with fire itself. It burns so brightly that it consumes itself. Now take a slow breath. Let these numbers and details drift past you like sparks from a campfire. You don't need to hold on to them, just let them pass through. Fact number 11. The Fire type advantage chart hasn't changed significantly since the type system was first established. Fire is super effective against grass, bug, ice, and steel. It's resisted by fire, water, rock, and dragon. This core profile has remained stable across nearly 30 years of Pokemon games, which gives Fire type a kind of timeless reliability. You always know what it's strong against. You always know what it fears. Fact number 12. The move Flamethrower has been in every mainline Pokemon game since the very beginning. It has a base power of 90 and a 10% chance to burn the target. It is arguably the most iconic Fire-type move in the franchise, and one of the most recognizable moves in all of Pokemon. The sound it makes, that rushing, crackling surge, is tied to so many memories for so many players. Flamethrower is what Fire-type Pokemon sound like in the imagination. Fact number 13. Fire Blast, introduced in Generation 1, was originally the strongest fire-type move available with a base power of 120. Its relatively low accuracy of 85% made it a gamble. Now, in that tension, enormous power balanced by the chance of a miss made it feel genuinely dangerous and exciting to use. Later generations would introduce moves with higher power, but Fire Blast remains one of the signature moves of the type and is still in use across competitive and casual play. Fact number 14. The ability Flash Fire, one of the signature abilities of Fire-type Pokémon, gives complete immunity to Fire-type moves and powers up the holder's own Fire-type moves by 50% when hit by one. This creates fascinating strategic situations. A Pokémon with Flash Fire becomes a willing target for fire attacks, essentially absorbing the opponent's fire moves and becoming more dangerous as a result. It's a counterintuitive mechanic that rewards players for understanding the type system at a deeper level. Fact number 15. The ability Flame Body, another classic fire-type ability, has a 30% chance to inflict a burn on any Pokémon that makes physical contact with the holder. But Flame Body has an additional, less discussed function. When you're hatching Pokémon eggs in the party, having a Pokémon with Flame Body cuts the egg hatch steps in half. This makes Pokémon like Magmar and Larvesta invaluable to breeders. A creature that breathes fire also keeps the eggs warm. It's one of those charming little game design touches that makes Pokémon feel like a living world. Now, if your mind is starting to quiet, let it. There's nothing you need to do here but drift. Drop a comment and let me know. Where in the world are you watching from and what time is it? I love seeing people from every corner of the globe settling in for the night. And if you're enjoying this journey through the fire type, hitting subscribe means you'll never miss the next one. Part 2. The First Flames of Kanto. Generation 1. Fire types. Kanto is where it all began. Nestled in the imagination of a man who grew up catching bugs in the last remaining fields at the edge of an expanding city, Kanto is a region built from nostalgia and wonder. And among all the creatures that live in its forests and caves and cities, the fire types hold a particular kind of magic. There are only 12 fire-type Pokémon in the original Kanto Pokédex, 14 if you count forms that came later. But each of them carries a weight of cultural and mythological significance that most players only begin to scratch the surface of. Well, let's start with the smallest flame. Fact number 16. Charmander, the lizard Pokémon, was not designed by Ken Sugimori. The entire Charmander evolutionary line was created by Atsuko Nishida, one of the key designers who worked alongside Sugimori on the original 151. Nishida is also credited with designing Pikachu, which means she is responsible for two of the most iconic creatures in the history of the franchise. Charmander's design went through multiple iterations before settling on the small orange lizard with a flame on its tail that became the starter, who arguably defined a generation of Pokémon players. Fact number 17. Charizard, the final evolution of Charmander, was actually designed before Charmander was. The design process worked in reverse. The designers began with the final, yet impressive form, and then worked backward to create the more modest starting shapes. Charmander and Charmeleon were built in response to Charizard's design, which creates a satisfying narrative coherence. The smallness of Charmander always carried the promise of something enormous and fire-winged at the end of the road. Fact number 18. The name Charmander is a combination of char and salamander. This is not merely a naming convenience. It reflects the actual mythological inspiration for the creature. In medieval European lore, the salamander was a creature believed to be so cold-blooded that it could walk through fire unharmed, or in some versions, a creature that was literally born from fire itself. Paracelsus, the 16th century physician and alchemist, described salamanders as the elemental creatures of fire. Charmander, with its perpetually burning tail, is a direct descendant of that ancient concept. Fact number 19, the flame on Charmander's tail is one of the most emotionally resonant pieces of lore in all of Pokémon. According to multiple Pokédex entries, if the flame ever goes out, Charmander will die. This is stated plainly, without drama, in the original game's Pokédex text. The flame that burns at the tip of its tail shows the strength of its life force. If it is healthy, the flame burns brightly. When it is exhausted, the flame flickers. The flame is the Pokémon. It is not ornamentation, it is existence itself. Players who read that entry as children often describe it as their first encounter, with the idea that caring for something fragile is an act of love. Fact number 20, Charizard is not a dragon type. It looks like a dragon. It breathes fire like a dragon. It flies on enormous wings like a dragon. And yet its typing is fire and flying, not fire and dragon. The reason is almost entirely about game balance. Dragon type in Generation 1 was intentionally overpowered and rare. The only dragon move in the original game was Dragon Rage, which always dealt exactly 40 points of damage regardless of level. The Dragon-type Pokémon were meant to feel untouchable and extraordinary. Making Charizard a starter Pokémon that players could have from the very beginning of the game, a Dragon-type would have shattered that sense of rarity and exclusivity. It would also have made the Fire starter dramatically more powerful than the Grass and Water starters, breaking the careful balance of the starter triangle. Fact number 21. Charizard's Japanese name is Lizardon. It's a compound of lizard and don, the suffix used for large reptiles, as in pteranodon or iguanodon. The American localization team renamed it Charizard from char and lizard, which shifts the emphasis from the reptile's scale to its charring fire. Both names are accurate to different aspects of the design. The Western name leans into the fire, the Japanese name leans into the creature. Fact number 22. Mega Charizard X, introduced in Pokémon X in 2013, finally gave Charizard the dragon typing that players had wanted for 17 years. Its black body and blue flames made it look genuinely otherworldly. But even more interesting is Mega Charizard Y, the version exclusive to Pokémon Y, which retained the fire and flying typing, and instead became extraordinarily powerful in sunlight thanks to its drought ability. Two different visions of what Charizard could become, separated only by which version of the game you played. Fact number 23. The Pokémon Company president, Tsunekazu Ishihara, once stated in an interview that Charizard was specifically expected to be popular with North American audiences because of an observed preference for strong, powerful characters among American children. This was a deliberate marketing calculation made even before the franchise reached international shores. They knew somehow that the fire dragon that wasn't quite a dragon would capture something. Fact number 24. In the original Pokémon Red and Green sprites, Charmander had 3 fingers on each hand. In Ken Sugimori's watercolor promotional artwork drawn after the game was already in development, Charmander had 4 fingers. These inconsistencies were common across the early Pokémon artwork. The game sprites came first, and the promotional art was created afterward, sometimes with slight differences. The finger count for Charmander remained a minor point of inconsistency across various official sources for years. Now let your mind wander just slightly. Picture the warm orange glow of a fire, the way it breathes and moves, without asking anything of you. Fact number 25. Vulpix, the fox Pokémon with 6 curling tails of fire, is one of the most culturally layered Pokémon in the entire franchise. It is based on the kitsune, a supernatural fox from Japanese folklore that is perhaps the single most recognizable creature in the yokai tradition. The kitsune is known for its intelligence, its shape-shifting ability, its connection to fire, and its extraordinary lifespan. According to the legends, a kitsune gains a new tail every 100 years it lives, and a fox with 9 tails is the oldest, wisest, and most powerful version of the creature. Vulpix has 6 tails. Ninetales has 9. Fact number 26. Ninetales evolves from Vulpix when exposed to a firestone, not through leveling up. This is significant because in Japanese folklore, the transformation of a kitsune from a young fox to a 9-tailed divine being is not a gradual process. It is a sudden, irreversible change that happens when the creature reaches a threshold of power or wisdom. The Firestone in the game mechanically mirrors this moment of threshold crossing. The same concept applies to the Alolan regional variant, where an Ice Stone is required instead. The change is sudden, it is permanent, and it transforms the creature completely. Fact number 27. The Pokédex entries for Ninetales describe a creature that can live for 1,000 years, that can hypnotize people with the flames it produces, and that can control the minds of others with its glowing red eyes. One entry warns explicitly that grabbing one of Ninetales' 9 tails will result in a 1,000-year curse. These entries are drawing directly from kitsune mythology. A 9-tailed kitsune is said to be so powerful that it can shapeshift into a human being, possess people, and create complex illusions. The Pokédex is, in its quiet way, describing a divine being trapped in a game mechanic. Fact number 28. Ninetales is said to be the reincarnation of 9 noble saints united into one body. This piece of lore appears in the Pokédex and is one of the most unusual spiritual concepts in the early games. It suggests that Ninetales is not merely an animal with magical powers, but a vessel for something far older and more complex. Each tail represents one of those souls. Fact number 29. Alolan Ninetales, introduced in Generation 7, is an ice and fairy type rather than fire type. It lives on snow-capped mountains in Alola and is revered as a sacred deity by the local people. The name for Alolan Vulpix in the old Hawaiian-influenced language of the islands is Kyokkyo, meaning white. The fact that an ice-type fox Pokémon exists alongside the fire-type one reflects the breadth of kitsune mythology, which includes 13 different elemental categories of kitsune. Fire is only one of them. Fact number 30. Growlithe, the puppy Pokémon, was partly inspired by the Shisa, the lion-dog guardian statues found throughout Okinawa and other parts of East Asia. Growlithe is designed as a loyal, protective canine who greets its trainer with fierce devotion, matches the role the Shisa plays in cultural tradition, a guardian that wards off evil and protects the household. Officer Jenny's frequent use of Growlithe as a police dog in the anime deepens this protective archetype beautifully. Fact number 31. Arcanine is listed in the Pokédex as a legendary Pokémon. This is one of the most charming inconsistencies in the entire franchise. In the game's data, the in-game Pokédex entry for Arcanine literally says, "A Pokémon that has long been admired for its beauty. It runs agilely as if on wings." But in the original Japanese cartridge, the Pokédex literally calls it a legendary Pokémon. This is thought to be a remnant of an early design draft in which Arcanine was planned to be one of the legendary bird trio alongside Articuno and Zapdos, with Arcanine serving as the legendary beast of the South. The layout of the sprite data in the original game supports this theory. When the legendary birds were settled on, Arcanine was demoted to a regular Pokémon, but no one updated its Pokédex entry. Fact number 32. Arcanine's name comes from arcane and canine. It is also connected to the Chinese zodiac. The dog is one of the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac, and Growlithe, like several other fire-type lines, has roots in those zodiac creatures. Many of the fire-type starters and early fire Pokémon draw from the 12 animals. Cyndaquil connects to the rat, Tapig to the pig, Torchic to the rooster, Chimchar to the monkey. Fire was seen by the designers as the natural type for these zodiac animals, perhaps because fire is one of the 5 elements in Chinese cosmology most associated with passion, transformation, and the South. Fact number 33. Ponyta and Rapidash, the horse Pokémon, are among the most elegant fire-type designs in all of Generation 1. Rapidash, which evolves from Ponyta at level 40, was for a long time the fastest pure fire type in the game in terms of base speed, sitting at 105. The design of a horse wreathed in fire draws from multiple mythological traditions: the Nuckelavee of Scottish mythology, the fire horses of Norse legend, and more broadly, the deep human association between horses and speed that makes fire, the fastest thing our ancestors knew, a natural companion for the creature. Fact number 34. Magmar's design is based on a combination of a booby, a type of seabird, a mythical salamander, and the Karura. The Karura is a divine bird creature from Japanese Hindu-Buddhist mythology, depicted as a massive firebird that breathes flames and protects the faithful. Magmar's face also draws from the Hyotoko, a traditional Japanese mask depicting a man blowing fire through a bamboo pipe. Magmar is, in short, a cultural composite, a creature assembled from multiple ancient fire traditions and compressed into a single, strange, beautiful design. But the fact that most Western players see it as just the weird red duck Pokémon is one of the great losses of localization. Fact number 35. Magmar was version exclusive to Pokemon Blue in the original games, while Electabuzz was exclusive to Pokemon Red. This established an early tradition of pairing Magmar with Electabuzz as counterpart Pokemon, a fire type and an electric type with parallel evolutionary lines. Both received pre-evolutions in Generation 2 with Magby and Elekid, and both received final evolutions in Generation 4 with Magmortar and Electivire. Magmar is one of the rare original 151 Pokemon to have its evolutionary line split across 3 separate generations of games. Fact number 36, Flareon, one of the original Eevee evolutions, is the fire-type member of the Eeveelution family. Now it evolves from Eevee when exposed to a Firestone. Its base special attack of 110 is genuinely impressive, but it has been historically hampered by a very limited move pool, particularly the lack of a physical fire-type move that matches its above-average physical attack stat. Flareon has been called one of the most tragically underperforming Pokemon in competitive play for years, despite having a very high base stat total because its best fire-type damaging moves are special rather than physical. This discrepancy was partially addressed in later generations, but Flareon still carries something of a reputation. Fact number 37. Moltres, the legendary bird of fire, was originally found in Victory Road in Pokemon Red and Blue, the cave just before the Pokemon League. Its placement there was deliberate and thematically rich. Victory Road is the last challenge before the end. Moltres waits in that threshold space in the dark before the light, like a guardian of the flame that heroes must pass to reach their destiny. In later games, Moltres was moved to various other locations, but that original placement in Victory Road remains one of the most elegant level design decisions in the franchise. Fact number 38. Moltres is named from molten and tres, the Spanish word for 3, indicating it is the third of the Kanto legendary birds. Its Japanese name is Firebird, which is essentially the simplest possible name for the creature it is. The English localization team chose something more textured, embedding its elemental nature in the molten, while using traz to root it in the bird trio. Fact number 39. According to its Pokédex entries, Moltres represents the season of spring. The legendary birds are said to embody the seasons in the games. Articuno represents winter, Zapdos represents summer, and Moltres represents spring. Autumn has no corresponding legendary bird, which has always been a quiet curiosity for fans who notice these things. The arrival of Moltres in a cold region is said to cause an early spring, its embers warming the frozen ground into bloom. Fact number 40. Moltres can heal itself by diving into the magma of an active volcano. This detail, buried in the Pokédex, is one of the most striking pieces of lore in the early games. It connects Moltres not just to fire in the abstract sense, but to the specific geological fire of the Earth itself. The slow, ancient heat of magma that was burning long before any creature lived on the surface above it. Moltres does not merely use fire, it is replenished by the planet's own core. Let those images sit quietly with you. No rush, no urgency, just warmth. Part 3. Johto's Sacred Flames. Generation 2 Fire Types. If Generation 1 was the origin of fire in Pokemon, Generation 2 was where it became something sacred. The Johto region, introduced in Pokemon Gold and Silver in 1999 in Japan, is steeped in tradition and ceremony. Its cities have temples and pagodas, its landscapes carry the weight of history, and its fire-type Pokemon are, almost without exception, drawn from mythological sources so deep and specific that you could spend an entire evening reading about them. Fact number 41. Cyndaquil, the fire mouse Pokemon, is the fire-type starter of the Johto region. Despite its name and designation as a fire mouse, Cyndaquil's design is actually based more closely on an echidna, a small, spiny mammal native to Australia and New Guinea. Its Japanese name, Hinoarashi, means fire echidna. The English localization renamed it Cyndaquil, playing on cinder and quill, which shifts the emphasis to something pricklier and more rodent-like. But the smooth, rounded body and the small, dark eyes are much closer to an echidna's gentle, defensive shape than to any mouse. Fact number 42. The flames on Cyndaquil's back do not burn when it is calm. They only ignite when the Pokemon is threatened or excited. This is a beautiful behavioral detail. Cyndaquil is by nature a shy, cautious creature, timid even by the standards of starter Pokémon. The fire is not a constant state, it is a response. But this design choice makes Cyndaquil feel authentically alive in a way that a perpetually burning version of the same Pokémon would not. The fire means something because it is earned. Fact number 43. Typhlosion, the final evolution of Cyndaquil, learns the move Eruption in later generations. A special fire-type move with a base power of 150 that decreases as the user's health decreases. Eruption is one of the most devastatingly powerful moves in competitive Pokémon when used on a full health Pokémon, and it became Typhlosion's signature role in competitive play. The image of a volcano stored inside a compact blue and yellow weasel bear creature is one of Pokémon's most satisfying visual and mechanical contradictions. Fact number 44. Hisuian Typhlosion, a regional variant introduced in Pokémon Legends, Arceus in 2022, Jin is a fire and ghost type. Its design shifts from the bright blues and yellows of the standard form to a pale, ethereal appearance with ghostly flames. The Pokédex describes it as guiding lost souls to the afterlife with its purifying flames. This transformation is one of the most dramatic regional variant changes in the franchise. The same Pokémon, interpreted through the lens of a different culture and a different time period, becomes something entirely different in emotional tone. Fact number 45. Ho-Oh, the legendary Firebird of Johto, was the very first legendary Pokémon to appear in the Pokémon anime. It appeared at the end of the first episode of the original series, flying across a rainbow sky above Ash Ketchum's head as he stood on a hill during a thunderstorm. The Pokédex could not identify it, and Ash described it simply as a golden Pokémon he had never seen before. This moment, a child staring up at a sky full of fire and light, unable to name what he was seeing, set the tone for the entire franchise. Wonder before knowledge, mystery before mastery. Fact number 46. Ho-Oh is based on the Fenghuang, the immortal phoenix of Chinese mythology. The Fenghuang is not quite the Western phoenix. It does not simply die and rebirth in flames. It is a divine bird that represents virtue, prosperity, and the union of opposites. It is associated with the south, with summer, and with the sun. Ho-Oh's name is itself a palindrome, and it is one of only 5 Pokémon whose names read the same forward and backward alongside Eevee, Girafarig, Alomomola, and Farigiraf. Fact number 47. Ho-Oh is also said to be inspired by an ancient Osakan folk legend about a phoenix that rose from the ashes of a great pagoda after it was destroyed by severe weather or war. This connection to Osaka, the city where many of Game Freak's early publishing deals were struck, gives Ho-Oh a kind of hometown dimension that resonates with the developer's own history. Fact number 48. Ho-Oh has the highest base special defense stat of any fire-type Pokémon. Its special defense of 154 is extraordinary, and it allows Ho-Oh to take hits from powerful special moves, including water-type moves, one of fire's natural weaknesses, with remarkable resilience. This survivability, combined with its Sacred Fire signature move and its Regenerator hidden ability, which restores a third of its HP when it switches out, that makes Ho-Oh one of the most formidable fire-type Pokémon in competitive play despite being available in relatively few game formats. Fact number 49. Sacred Fire, Ho-Oh's signature move, has a base power of 100 and a 50% chance of burning the target. A 50% burn rate is extraordinarily high. Most moves that inflict status effects have a 10 to 30% chance. The name Sacred Fire and the probability make it feel genuinely holy, like a cleansing rather than simply an attack. Fact number 50. The Burned Tower in Ekritique City is where the 3 legendary beasts, Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, were reborn. According to the game's lore, 150 years before the events of Gold and Silver, the Brass Tower in Ekritique City was struck by lightning and burned to the ground. 3 unnamed Pokémon were trapped inside and perished in the fire. Ho-Oh, moved by the tragedy, descended and used its divine power to resurrect the 3 creatures as the legendary beasts. Entei represents the flames of the fire that destroyed the tower. When Entei roars, a volcano erupts somewhere in the world. Every time a new volcano forms, a new Entei is said to be born. Fact number 51. Entei has the highest HP base stat of any fire-type Pokémon in the franchise, sitting at 115. This gives the volcano Pokemon an unusual profile for a fire type. Most fire types are glassy, offensive creatures with mediocre bulk. Entei is designed to feel truly massive and enduring, like a force of geological time rather than a quick burst of flame. Fact number 52. The legendary beasts in the original Gold and Silver games were roaming Pokemon. They would appear on a random route each time you entered a new area, and when you encountered them, they would immediately flee. Catching them required tracking them through the Pokédex, using moves that prevented them from fleeing, or having the move Mean Look. This mechanic was either beloved or despised depending on the player, but it perfectly captured something true about these Pokemon. They are not meant to be caught. They are meant to be chased. They are meant to be glimpsed at the edge of the world just long enough to know they're real. Fact number 53. Magby, the pre-evolution of Magmar, was introduced in Generation 2 alongside Elekid and Smoochum as baby Pokemon, smaller, younger forms of existing Generation 1 creatures. Magby is found by incubating an egg from a Magmar. Its body temperature is said to exceed 1,100 degrees Celsius from birth. The image of a baby Pokemon that is hot enough to melt steel before it can even walk is one of those moments where the Pokédex's quiet extremism is at its finest. Fact number 54. Slugma, the lava Pokemon, has no solid parts. It is described in the Pokédex as a flowing mass of magma that must keep moving constantly. If Slugma stops moving, it cools and hardens. Its body is its motion. It will die, or perhaps simply become a rock, if it ever ceases to flow. This is one of the most unusual biological concepts in the entire Pokemon franchise, and it reflects a genuine geological phenomenon. Lava flows that harden into basalt when they stop moving, while the molten core beneath continues flowing through tunnels called lava tubes. Fact number 55. Magcargo, the evolution of Slugma, has a body temperature of approximately 18,000 degrees Fahrenheit. To put that in perspective, the surface of the sun is approximately 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Magcargo is, according to its own Pokédex entry, significantly hotter than the surface of the sun. This makes Magcargo one of the most implausibly destructive Pokémon ever described in the Pokédex, wrapped in the body of what is essentially a slow-moving snail. The contrast between its ponderous, round shape and its astronomical heat is one of Pokemon's most quietly absurdist jokes. Fact number 56, Houndour and Houndoom. Introduced in Generation 2, represent a darker side of Fire-type design. Houndoom is a Fire and Dark type, and its lore is genuinely unsettling. Its Pokédex entries describe the burns caused by Houndoom's flames as impossible to heal. The pain simply does not go away. Houndoom's design draws from the hellhound of European mythology, particularly Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guards the underworld. Its skull-like markings, twisted horns, and the scythe-like curve of its tail all reinforce that infernal imagery. Houndoom is one of the few fire types that feels genuinely threatening rather than merely powerful. Part 4. Hoenn's Volcanic Heart. Generation 3 Fire Types. The Hoenn region, introduced in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire in 2002 in Japan, is built around a fundamental ecological tension. The conflict between land and sea, represented by the villainous teams Magma and Aqua. Team Magma wants to expand the landmass to create more room for life on land. Team Aqua wants to expand the oceans. Fire-type Pokemon, naturally, find their deepest resonance with Team Magma's volcanic ambitions. Fact number 57. Torchic, the Fire-type starter of Hoenn, was the first of what would become a trilogy of fire and fighting dual-type final evolutions. Torchic is a small chick with a pouch of fire hidden in its body that it uses to produce scorching blasts. It evolves into Combusken, which gains the fighting type, and then into Blaziken, which became one of the most celebrated competitive Pokemon in the franchise's history. Fact number 58. Blaziken was so powerful that it was banned from standard competitive play in Generation 5. Much the culprit was its hidden ability, Speed Boost, which raises Blaziken's speed by 1 stage at the end of every turn. Combined with Blaziken's already explosive offensive stats and its ability to use Protect to guarantee a free speed boost, it created a Pokemon that could outspeed and destroy almost anything after just 2 or 3 turns of setup. It was eventually placed into the Ubers tier, the highest restriction category in competitive Pokémon, where it remains company to actual legendary Pokémon. Fact number 59. Torchic begins a design tradition in the series where multiple consecutive Fire-type starters evolve into Fire and Fighting dual types. Torchic to Blaziken in Generation 3, Chimchar to Infernape in Generation 4, Tepig to Emboar in Generation 5. 3 generations in a row, thought of the Fire starter ended up as Fire and Fighting. By the time Generation 6 arrived, the pattern was so well established and so universally noticed by players that Game Freak broke it deliberately. Fennekin, the Generation 6 Fire starter, evolves into Delphox, a Fire and Psychic type. The departure was a statement. Fact number 60. Numel, the docile camel Pokémon, carries a hump of magma that it stores like a reservoir of fuel. When Numel is surprised or struck, the magma sloshes around violently and can be spilled, destabilizing the creature. It is described as being utterly oblivious to pain, which gives it an eerie quality. Not dangerous in the way that Houndoom is dangerous, but dangerous in the way that something that feels nothing is dangerous. Numel evolves into Camerupt, evolves into a dual fire and ground type that is essentially a living volcano. The twin craters on Camerupt's back have been known to erupt when the Mayamon is angered. Fact number 61. Torkoal, the coal Pokémon, is one of the only pure fire types in Generation 3. It is a tortoise that burns coal inside its body to generate its fire, exhaling black smoke when it is exhausted. Torkoal's design is unusual in the fire type because it is fundamentally industrial, a creature that runs on fuel rather than on an internal magical flame. This places Torkoal in an interesting symbolic space, somewhere between the natural fire of lava and the manufactured fire of the coal-fired furnace that powered the Industrial Revolution. Fact number 62. Torkoal is used by Juan, the Setopolis gym leader, in Pokémon Emerald. Juan is a water-type specialist, which makes his use of a fire-type on his team genuinely strange. The in-game explanation is that Juan's team is constructed for beauty as much as for strategy, and Torkoal's white smoke is considered aesthetically pleasing. It's one of those small moments where the fiction of the Pokémon world acknowledges that the creatures are valued for reasons beyond combat utility. Fact number 63. In Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire, the main storyline revolves around Team Magma attempting to awaken Groudon, the ground-type legendary associated with the expansion of landmass through volcanic activity. The original Groudon was not fire-type, it was pure ground. But when Pokémon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire introduced Primal Reversion in 2014, Primal Groudon gained a dual fire and ground typing. In its primal form, Groudon becomes the tallest and heaviest fire type in the franchise, a massive red and gold behemoth that can expand continents. Primal Groudon also has the highest base attack and defense stats of any fire type. Fact number 64. The Pokémon Volcanion, introduced in Generation 6 but deeply connected to the fire-type tradition established in Hoenn, is the only Pokémon that is both fire-type and water-type. It expels steam at enormous pressure through the ring on its back, using the reaction between its internal fire and the water it absorbs from its environment. Volcanion's unique type combination creates a strange defensive profile. It resists fire, water, ice, steel, and fairy, and is immune to burns. The steam it produces is powerful enough to destroy a mountain. Fact number 65. Ruby and Sapphire originally had a much more environmentally charged narrative about land versus sea. Early development notes suggest that the message about human impact on nature was supposed to be more direct and confrontational. The final versions of the games softened the theme considerably, but the remnants are visible in how Team Magma speaks about expansion and progress, and how Team Aqua speaks about returning the world to its natural, ocean-covered state. Fire-type Pokémon exist at the center of that conflict. They are the creatures of volcanic land, of the geological force that makes new islands, new mountains, new ground. Part 5. The Diamond and Pearl. Scarcity, Generation 4. Fire types. Pokémon Diamond and Pearl are famous among fans for one of the most discussed design decisions in franchise history: the almost complete absence of fire-type Pokémon in the regional Sinnoh Pokédex. Fact number 66. In the original Diamond and Pearl, if you did not choose Chimchar as your starter, there were essentially only two Fire-type evolutionary lines available in the entire game before the National Pokédex was unlocked. The Chimchar line and the Ponyta line. That's it. Every other Fire-type required either trading from a previous game or waiting until after you became the champion. This was not an oversight. Shigeki Morimoto, one of the Game Freak developers, acknowledged in later interviews that the team was aware of the imbalance and had chosen to lean into it rather than correct it. The scarcity was intentional. Fact number 67. Chimchar, the Fire-type starter of Sinnoh, is based on the Sun Wukong, the Monkey King of Chinese mythology. The Monkey King is one of the most famous characters in Asian literature, a figure of unruly power, cleverness, and fire. The flame that burns on Chimchar's behind is actually fueled by gas produced in its belly, and it keeps burning even in rain. The flame cannot be extinguished by water alone. This detail connects Chimchar to the inextinguishable, irrepressible nature of the Monkey King himself. Fact number 68. Infernape, the final evolution of Chimchar, is based specifically on Sun Wukong in his fully realized power, a fighter crowned by flame, wearing the golden headband of constraint. Infernape's fighting style is explicitly described in the Pokédex as the use of both fists and feet simultaneously, mirroring Sun Wukong's combat in the classic novel Journey to the West. Its speed stat of 108 and its equal attack and special attack stats of 104 each make it one of the most balanced offensive Pokémon ever designed. Fact number 69. Magmortar, the final evolution of Magmar, was introduced in Generation 4 as a trade evolution. To evolve Magmar into Magmortar, you must trade it while it is holding a Magmarizer item. Magmortar can launch fireballs from the cannon-like tubes that replace its hands. According to its Pokédex entries, when it fires a barrage of fireballs at temperatures exceeding 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, its arms begin to melt. Magmortar literally consumes itself when it fights at full intensity. It lives in active volcanic craters, and only one breeding pair of Magmortar occupies each volcano. Fact number 70. Heatran, the Lava Dome Pokémon, is one of the most unusual legendaries in the franchise. It is the only non-mythical legendary that is genderless but can be male or female. This was retconned in later generations to make Heatran legitimately gender-flexible. It lives inside active volcanoes, burrowing into rock faces with claws made of cross-shaped steel. Heatran's blood is described as molten magma, and its body is so hot that the steel components partially melt. The creature is born from the raging heat of the volcano itself. Unlike most legendaries, which have grand cosmological significance, Heatran feels geological. It is a creature of the rock and the heat beneath the ground. Fact number 71. Rotom's heat form, created when Rotom possesses a microwave oven, gains the Fire type as a secondary typing. This is one of the more surreal entries in the Fire type roster. A ghost that lives inside a microwave isn't exactly the mythological grandeur of Ho-Oh or the ancient mystery of Ninetales, but it reflects something true about modern fire. We have contained it in metal boxes in our kitchens and use it to heat food. Rotom Heat is Fire type completely stripped of its wild, elemental significance and reduced to domestic utility. There is something darkly funny about that. Fact number 72. Pokémon Diamond and Pearl introduced the physical and special split, which fundamentally changed the Fire type. Before Generation 4, all Fire type moves were automatically special. After the split, each move was individually classified. This meant that physical Fire type moves like Fire Punch suddenly became viable in a way they never had been before, because before Generation 4, Fire Punch used the attack stat for determining damage, but was categorized as a special move in the damage formula. The distinction had been blurry and confusing. The split clarified it forever. Part 6, Unova's Inferno, Generation 5 and Volcarona. Generation 5, released in Japan in 2010, is widely regarded as one of the most narratively ambitious generations in Pokemon's history. Pokemon Black and White introduced an entirely new roster of Pokemon for the Unova region, intentionally not including any pre-existing Pokemon in the regional Pokédex in order to force players to discover everything fresh. And within this new generation lived some of the most extraordinary Fire-type Pokemon ever designed. Fact number 73. The fire-type starter of Unova is Tepig, the fire pig Pokémon. Tepig is based on the pig of the Chinese zodiac, the 12th and final animal, which is associated with wealth, honesty, and hard work. It evolves into Pignite, which gains the fighting type, and then into Embor, a massive boar warrior wreathed in flames. Embor is the only starter final evolution to have more than 500 base HP. Its HP stat of 110 gives it unusual physical bulk for a starter. Fun fact number 74, Darumaka and Darmanitan, the fire-type creatures based on the Daruma doll, are among the most culturally specific Pokémon in the franchise. The Daruma doll is a traditional Japanese good luck charm based on the Buddhist monk Bodhidharma. The dolls are round and weighted at the bottom, so they always right themselves, a symbol of perseverance and self-righting after failure. Darumaka spends its time sleeping curled up, and the fireballs it produces in its belly are what keep it warm as it rests. When Darmanitan falls below half health, it can activate Zen mode, transforming into a blue meditative form that is completely different in stat distribution and even gains the psychic type, a direct reference to Bodhidharma's legendary meditative powers. Fact number 75. Litwick, Lampent, and Chandelure form one of the most atmospheric evolutionary lines in fire-type history. Litwick is a small ghost candle whose flame is not truly fire in the conventional sense. It burns souls. Its Pokédex entry describes how Litwick pretends to guide the lost to safety with its light, but is actually absorbing the life force of anyone who follows it. Chandelure, the final form, floats in old mansions, luring people with its hypnotic flame before burning away their spirit completely. These are not merely dark Pokémon. They are genuinely terrifying if you sit with the lore for more than a few seconds. Fact number 76. Chandelure has the highest base special attack of any non-legendary, non-mega fire type. Pokémon at 145 mm. This extraordinary offensive power, combined with its access to both fire and ghost-type moves, makes Chandelure one of the most offensively versatile Pokémon in competitive play. Fact number 77. Heatmor, the anteater Pokémon, is one of the few fire types whose fire is described as existing outside its body. It draws in air through its tail and uses it to intensify the flames it breathes through the hollow cavity of its abdomen. Heatmor is the natural predator of Durant, the steel-type ant Pokémon. Fire being super effective against steel captures this predatory relationship perfectly. It is one of the only examples in the Pokémon franchise where two specific non-legendary Pokémon are described as having a persistent predator-prey relationship in the wild. Fact number 78. Reshiram, the vast white legendary of Pokémon White, is the first Fire and Dragon dual-type legendary in franchise history. Its arrival in Generation 5 was significant because Charizard fans have been asking for Fire and Dragon for 15 years. Reshiram is described as the Dragon of Truth, contrasted with Zekrom's electricity and thunder, which represent ideals. The Tau trio at the center of Black and White's narrative uses elemental legendaries as philosophical metaphors. Reshiram is fire that burns away falsehood. Fact number 79. Reshiram's Turbo Blaze ability makes its fire-type moves bypass any ability that would normally weaken or prevent them. Flash Fire, Water Absorb, Motor Drive, none of them apply when Reshiram attacks. The mythology here is exact. Truth does not yield to magical defenses. It simply burns through them. Now, your breathing is probably slowing. That's good. Now, let the warmth of these stories be the last thing you feel before sleep. Fact number 80. Volcarona. Let's spend time with Volcarona. Perhaps no single non-legendary Pokémon in the franchise has inspired as much devoted fan theory and genuine aesthetic awe as this six-winged fire moth from Unova. Volcarona evolves from Larvesta starting at level 59, the highest evolution level of any two-stage evolutionary line in the franchise. It is a bug and fire dual type, and it carries more cultural weight per pixel than almost any creature in the game. Fact number 81. Volcarona is said to be an embodiment of the sun. Ancient peoples revered it as a deity, and a shrine was built to it in the Relic Castle, an ancient ruin buried in a desert in Unova. The Pokédex states that when volcanic ash darkened the atmosphere of the ancient world, Blocking out the sun, Volcarona appeared and provided a replacement. Its 6 burning wings creating a sea of fire that gave light and warmth to a dying world. The desert where the relic castle stands is thought to be the scorched remnant of Volcarona's flame from that ancient event. Fact number 82. Volcarona's name comes from volcano, Vulcan, the Roman god of fire, and corona, the upper atmosphere of the sun. Its wings resemble petals of the tiger lily and solar corona imagery simultaneously. Its eyes are shaped like sun crosses. Its antennae bear a resemblance to the horns of the Egyptian goddess Hathor. Its design draws from Egyptian solar mythology, Japanese summer moth folklore, Roman divine fire, and Christian seraph imagery all at once. It is one of the most mythologically dense designs in the franchise. Fact number 83. There is a persistent and well-supported fan theory that Volcarona was originally planned to be a legendary Pokémon. Evidence includes it has a dedicated out-of-battle sprite and a formal encounter in the Relic Castle rather than a random, wild encounter, something almost exclusively reserved for legendaries in Generation 5. Its catch rate of 15 is lower than almost any non-legendary Pokémon. Its Pokédex number places it between Kyurem and the other mythicals, and it is the last species in the National Pokédex before the legendary entries begin. Volcarona can breed, which legendaries cannot, but almost every other metric points towards something that was nearly extraordinary being gently pulled back from that brink. Fact number 84. Larvesta, Volcarona's pre-evolution, that carries the ancient epithet, the larva that stole the sun. Ancient civilizations in the Pokémon world believed it had fallen from the sun itself, and they both worshipped and feared it. The visual of a tiny, fuzzy caterpillar being regarded with the same reverence as a solar deity is one of the more quietly humbling ideas in Pokémon's long history of hiding profound things in small places. Fact number 85. Ken Sugimori stated in a Nintendo Dream interview that Volcarona was originally designed with 4 wings. The change to 6 wings was made specifically to make it appear more powerful and to reflect its status as a sun embodiment. The Seraph, the highest order of angel in Christian theology, has 6 wings. The use of 6 wings to signify divine power is a motif that crosses multiple traditions. Fact number 86. In Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, 2 Paradox Pokémon were introduced that are ancient and futuristic counterparts to Volcarona, Slitherwing and Iron Moth. Slitherwing is a past variant, a bug and fighting type that cannot fly, possessing the restless terrestrial energy of an ancestor that had not yet developed the power of fire. Iron Moth is a future variant, a bug and poison type, its flame replaced by radioactive energy. Volcarona evolved through technological rather than mythological forces. The 3 together form a lineage across time, a single creature transformed by the forces of each era. Part 7. Kalos, Alola, and the Refinement of Fire, Generations 6 and 7. As Pokémon moved into its 6th and 7th generations, the Fire type began to receive some of its most aesthetically sophisticated and culturally resonant designs. The designers were more experienced working with higher definition hardware, and with greater confidence in exploring folklore and design traditions from outside Japan. Fact number 87. Fennekin, the fox Pokémon of Generation 6, is the Fire-type starter of the Kalos region. Unlike its predecessor Fire starters, Fennekin was designed from the beginning to avoid the fighting-type secondary. Its final evolution, Delphox, is Fire and Psychic, a combination that had never been used on a starter before. Delphox is based on the figure of the witch or wizard, carrying a branch of flaming wood like a staff and seeing visions in its flames. The Fox connection brings it full circle to the kitsune tradition of Vulpix and Ninetales, creating a generational echo. Fact number 88. Braixen, the middle stage of Fennekin's evolution, carries a wooden stick tucked into its tail. When it needs to battle, it draws the stick out, ignites it with its tail flame, and uses it as a wand. The image is so precise, a young witch in training, not yet fully formed, using a prop because her internal power is not yet sufficient without it, that it elevates a middle evolution from a design curiosity into a genuine character study. Fact number 89. Talonflame, the fire and flying type evolution of Fletchinder, became one of the most unexpectedly dominant Pokémon in competitive Generation 6 play. Its ability Gale Wings gave all flying type moves priority, meaning they would always go first regardless of speed. Talonflame combined this with Brave Bird, a powerful flying type move, to become an extraordinarily fast and lethal attacker. It was banned from lower tier play and forced the entire metagame to adapt around it. It is perhaps the only fire-type bird that achieved genuinely threatening status in competitive play at the highest level. Fact number 90. Turtonator, introduced in Generation 7, is the rare combination of fire and dragon type on a creature that is not legendary or a starter evolution. It is based on the Mata Mata turtle and the concept of the fire-breathing turtle from Chinese mythology. Its shell is filled with explosive chemicals that detonate when struck. According to the Pokédex, the back of Turtonator's shell has a cross-shaped weak point. Hitting it directly triggers a massive explosion. It has a specific move, Shell Trap, that functions as a counterattack. Turtonator sets the trap, and if struck by a physical move that turn, Shell Trap activates with enormous power. It's a genuinely unique mechanic tied directly to the creature's biology. Fact number 91. Alolan Marowak, introduced in Generation 7 as a regional variant, is the only Alolan form to gain the Fire type. Standard Marowak is Ground type. Alolan Marowak is Fire and Ghost type, swinging a bone that is perpetually alight with ghostly blue flames. The transformation is explained by the lore. In Alola, Marowak learned to communicate with the spirit of its deceased mother through the flame, which cannot be extinguished by water. The grief that defines standard Marowak's lore, wearing the skull of its mother, striking the ground in sorrow, becomes something transcendent in Alola. At the fire is the mother's spirit, kept alive by the child who carries it. Fact number 92. Salazzle, introduced in Generation 7, is the evolution of Salandit and one of only 2 Pokémon with the fire and poison dual type. It is exclusively female. Salandit evolves into Salazzle only if female, with male Salandit being unable to evolve at all. Salazzle emits a toxic gas that acts as a pheromone, which it uses to control groups of male Salandit who serve it. It is based on the fire salamander and the seductive fox demons of Japanese mythology. Its design occupies a genuinely unusual space in the fire type. Not fierce, not divine, but intoxicating. Fact number 93. Incineroar, the final evolution of Litten and the fire-type starter of Alola, is a wrestler, a professional wrestler. Its entire design language is built around the heel character, the villain of a wrestling match who plays dirty, taunts the crowd, and doesn't care if you like them. Its Intimidate ability, which lowers opponents' attack on switch-in, fits perfectly. Incineroar became one of the most used Pokémon in competitive doubles formats, not because of its power, but because of Fake Out, a move that makes the target flinch on the first turn, combined with Intimidate and its ability Parting Shot, which drops both of the opponent's offensive stats simultaneously. It is the ultimate support heal. Fact number 94. Incineroar's signature move, Darkest Lariat, ignores all stat changes on the target. This means that no matter how many times your opponent has boosted their defense, Darkest Lariat hits them as if those boosts were never applied. For a wrestling villain character, the philosophical implications of that move are perfect. It doesn't matter how strong you think you've made yourself. I'm coming through anyway. Fact number 95. Litten, the fire-type starting Pokémon of Alola, has an unusual grooming behavior described in the Pokédex. It collects the flammable, oily fur it grooms from its body and uses it as fuel for its fire attacks. When it has stored enough fur to produce a large flame, it will ignite the collected material and blast it at targets. There is something quietly beautiful about a cat building its own fire from nothing, quietly and methodically, through the everyday routine of looking after itself. Part 8. Galar, Hisui, and Paldea, the newest flames. The most recent generations have continued to expand and deepen the fire type in ways that reward players who pay close attention to design, lore, and the quiet connections between Pokémon. Fact number 96. Scorbunny, the fire-type starter of Generation 8's Galar region, is a rabbit based on the concept of a football player. It evolves into Raboot and then Cinderace, a bipedal rabbit with fire blazing around it like a soccer stadium and a signature move called Pyro Ball, a giant fireball kicked with athletic precision. Cinderace became one of the most popular competitive Pokémon of its generation, particularly after its hidden ability Libero was discovered to function like Protean, changing Cinderace's type to match whatever move it uses before the move connects. Fact number 97. Centiskorch, the fire and bug type, dual type introduced in Generation 8, is one of the few fire type Pokemon that is not based on a mammal, bird, or mythological creature. It is a centipede. It reaches temperatures of 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit when coiling around prey. Its Gigantamax form makes it massive and wraps its burning body around opponents like a living furnace. Centiskorch shares the bug and fire combination with Larvesta and Volcarona, a rare type pairing that now has 3 evolutionary lines to its name. Fact number 98. The Pokemon Fuecoco, the fire-type starter of Generation 9's Paldea region, is a small red crocodilian whose head is shaped like a jalapeno pepper. Its evolution Crocolore wears a sombrero made of flames. And its final evolution Skeledirge is a massive, mournful crocodilian with a ghostly bird perpetually aflame singing on top of its head. Skeledirge is a fire and ghost type, a combination that evokes the spectral fire traditions of multiple cultures. Its signature move, Torch Song, raises its special attack by 1 stage after every use. Skeledirge has become one of the most popular starter final evolutions in recent memory. Fact number 99. Chi-Yu, one of the 4 ruinous legendary Pokemon of Generation 9, is a fire and dark type legendary based on the concept of a set of beads corrupted by the collective envy and greed of humanity. It is said that its body temperature exceeds 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature higher even than Magcargo's fictional sun-exceeding figure. Chi-Yu's body was originally a set of beautiful beads, and when the hatred and covetousness of those who desired them seeped into the beads over centuries, it awakened as a Pokemon. It turns everything near it into lava. Fact number 100. Armarouge and Ceruledge are a pair of version-exclusive Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet that represent 2 interpretations of the same soul. Armarouge is a fire and psychic type knight who draws power from the soul of a fallen soldier, wearing magical armor left behind by a warrior. Ceruledge is a fire and ghost type who wields the blades of an ancient soldier who died in battle and whose grudges remain unresolved. Both are evolutions of Charcadet, a small fire type that is described as having the characteristics of a young warrior. The thematic depth of these two, one drawing on soulful magic, one driven by lingering resentment, is one of the more poetic design achievements of the 9th generation. Fact number 101. Gouging Fire, a paradox. Pokemon introduced in Scarlet is an ancient relative of Entei from a distant past. Its body is larger and more primal than the modern Entei, with enormous plumes of flame and a wilder, less refined aesthetic. The suggestion that Entei, one of the most powerful legendary beasts of Johto, was itself the descendant of something even more ancient and brutal is a quietly unsettling piece of world-building. Even divine creatures evolve from something cruder. Part 8b. The Strange and the Specific. Regional details, hidden lore, and small wonders. Before we move into the competitive history and the wider cultural footprint of the fire type, let's slow down even further. Because there's a layer beneath the famous facts, the quiet, specific details that even dedicated fans sometimes miss. These are the things you find when you sit with the Pokédex long enough. The notes in the margin, the details in the background. Fact number 96, reassigned. Ponyta's flames, according to its Pokédex entries, do not burn those it trusts. If Ponyta has bonded with a trainer, that trainer can lay a hand on the mane of fire and feel only warmth. No burning, no pain. The flame distinguishes between friend and threat. It is not indiscriminate. It is a living fire, a relational fire, one that has learned to read the intentions of the people near it. This is one of the most quietly, emotionally sophisticated concepts in early Pokémon lore, and most players read it once, nod, and move on without sitting with what it actually means. Fact number 97, reassigned. Arcanine's speed is described in the Pokédex as so exceptional that it was once spoken of in China as a legendary creature. Its legs move so fluidly that observers in the ancient world could not explain how it ran so fast without appearing to touch the ground. The legend grew. a creature that ran on air that moved like a flame across the landscape. This is why Arcanine appears alongside the actual legendary birds in the original game's sprite data. It was destined to be a legend. It nearly was. Fact number 98, reassigned. Flareon's body temperature is regulated through the large, fluffy mane that surrounds its neck and chest. The mane functions as a heat dissipation system. Without it, a Flareon's internal temperature would exceed what its organs could survive. This is a small, precise detail that makes Flareon feel genuinely biological rather than fantastical. It is a creature that has evolved an anatomical solution to the problem of being made of fire. The fluff is not decoration, it is survival. Fact number 99, reassigned. Magby, according to its silver Pokédex entry, spits out balls of fire by compressing the air inside its lungs and heating it to extreme temperatures. This description implies a physiology where the lungs serve double duty, both respiratory organ and combustion chamber. The image of a baby Pokémon whose breathing apparatus is also a weapon is one of those small Pokédex details that, if you think about it for more than a moment, becomes genuinely extraordinary. Fact number 100, reassigned. The move Flame Charge, introduced in Generation 5, is one of the only offensive Fire-type moves that raises the user's speed as a secondary effect. After using Flame Charge, the user's speed rises by 1 stage. This gives it a unique role in competitive play as a setup move for slower fire types. They can use Flame Charge to both deal damage and accelerate themselves simultaneously. The visual logic of the move, a Pokémon engulfing itself in fire and charging forward, the combustion making it faster, is perfectly intuitive. Fact number 101, reassigned. Turtonator's signature move Shell Trap requires a specific sequence. Use Shell Trap first in the turn, and then if the opponent uses a physical contact move against Turtonator before the end of the turn. The Shell Trap activates with 150 base power. But if the opponent uses a special move or doesn't attack, nothing happens. Shell Trap is a gamble, a trap that can deliver overwhelming force or nothing at all depending on the opponent's decision. It makes Turtonator's battles feel like a standoff, both sides knowing the trap is there, both sides calculating whether to spring it. Fact number 102, reassigned. Reboot, the middle evolution of Scorbunny, is notable for being one of the few middle-stage starter evolutions to feel genuinely cool on its own terms rather than merely functional. It wears its kicked-back posture like a street fighter. Hands in pockets, fire barely suppressed, not particularly interested in impressing anyone. Its design energy is different from the eager, open cheerfulness of Scorbunny and the fully committed intensity of Cinderace. Reboot occupies the adolescent middle ground perfectly. Capable of fire, not yet ready to fully own it. Fact number 103, reassigned. Cinderace's Pyro Ball is described in the Pokédex and the anime as a technique where Cinderace ignites a pebble with its feet, kicking it into a superheated sphere of fire before launching it at high velocity. The ball rotates during flight, generating additional heat from the friction of spinning. It can melt through most materials on impact. The move has a 10% chance to burn the target. For a Pokémon who is fundamentally an athlete, Pyro Ball is the perfect signature move. It turns the mundane act of kicking a rock into something genuinely dangerous through the application of pure passion and speed. Fact number 104, reassigned. Litten, the Fire-type starter of Generation 7, was designed to look deliberately unfriendly compared to its starter counterparts. Where Rowlet is plump and endearing and Popplio is eager and expressive, Litten is still, composed, and watchful. The design choice was intentional. Game Freak wanted to create a starter that appealed to players who prefer their companions to earn affection rather than beg for it. Litten's cool exterior conceals intense loyalty. Its Pokédex notes that it burns its shed fur for energy and does not easily show its emotions. The fire is internal. It has to be coaxed out. Fact number 105, reassigned. The anime episode in which Ash's Charizard saved the life of Liza's Charizard at the Charicific Valley, a reserve in Johto devoted to raising powerful Charizard, is one of the clearest expressions of the fire type's emotional register in the series. Charizard, who had been reluctant and disobedient and difficult throughout 2 seasons, threw itself into an ice storm to save another Charizard it barely knew. The gesture was wordless, instinctive, and expensive. Charizard was nearly frozen. and afterward it chose to stay at the Karasific Valley to train, leaving Ash. Not because it rejected him, but because it had become something that needed to grow beyond what Ash could provide at that moment. That decision, made by a Pokemon in an animated children's show, remains one of the most emotionally honest character moments in the franchise. Fact number 106, reassigned. Pyroar, introduced in Generation 6, was the first pure fire and normal dual-type Pokemon in franchise history. The type combination was unusual enough that players spent considerable time trying to understand the strategic implications. Fire's weaknesses to water, rock, and ground were unchanged, while Normal's immunity to Ghost-type was added, but Pyroar gained no particularly novel resistances from the normal typing, but it gained a Ghost immunity that made it useful in specific situations. Fact number 107, reassigned. Emboar's design takes the boar fire symbol and extrapolates it to its most extreme conclusion. Now, a massive boar who carries his power in the beard of flames around his neck and the heaviness of his shoulders. The word Emboar contains ember and boar, but it also rhymes with endeavor in some readings. The creature's very name sounds like effort, like someone putting their weight behind something and pushing through. This is very much what Emboar does in battle. Fact number 108, reassigned. The original Pokemon anime's episode Riddle Me This, the Cinnabar Island Gym episode, is one of the most fondly remembered Fire-type episodes in the series. Blaine, the gym leader, presented Ash with riddles before allowing him to challenge the gym. The riddles were themed around fire, heat, and volcanoes. The gym itself was built on the edge of an active volcano. Although the whole episode was an exercise in atmospheric world building that the early anime did better than almost any comparable children's media of the time. Fact number 109, reassigned. The volcano on Cinnabar Island is described in the original games as having gone dormant, then reactivated, then causing significant damage to the island itself. By the time of Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, the island has been partially destroyed by the eruption. This continuity detail, a real world-altering event that happened between game versions, gives the Pokemon world a sense of geological time that most players walk past without registering. Cinnabar's volcano is not a backdrop. It is a character in its own right. Fact number 110, reassigned. Fletchinder. The middle evolution of the Fletchling line and a Fire and Flying type was the first Fire and Flying dual type available in the early game of a main series title since Moltres was a post-game encounter. The accessibility of Fletchinder in the main game of Pokemon X and Y gave players the ability to use that type combination in team building before the late game in a way that hadn't been possible before. The type pairing is rare enough that having it available early felt genuinely novel. Fact number 111, reassigned. Talonflame's Gale Wings ability, in its Generation 6 implementation, gave all flying-type moves priority regardless of HP. This was changed in Generation 7 to only work at full health, a significant nerf that fundamentally changed how Talonflame was played competitively. The change is a good example of how a single ability can define a Pokemon's entire competitive identity in one generation and completely remove it in the next. Players who built teams around Generation 6 Talonflame found their strategies suddenly obsolete. Now settle deeper. The night is full and quiet. There's nothing to figure out. Fact number 112, reassigned. Chi-Yu's design as a pair of corrupted golden beads is one of the most abstract fire-type designs in the franchise. Rather than a creature that produces fire biologically, Chi-Yu is a concept. The concentrated desire and envy of humanity given form as a fish-like creature made of red flame. Its eyes glow with a hatred that has accumulated over centuries. The design asks an unsettling question. What if fire is not just heat but yearning? What if the most dangerous flame is not the geological or the meteorological, but the human? Fact number 113, reassigned. Ceruledge, the fire and ghost type. Knight, introduced in Generation 9, wields blades made of the solidified regrets of fallen soldiers. The fire that burns on its blades is described not as heat in the conventional sense, but as spiritual residue, the energy that remains when a warrior dies with something left undone. Ceruledge fights with borrowed fire, which is its tragedy and its power. Unlike Armarouche, which draws its strength from a willing partnership, Cerulege is animated by something that was never fully extinguished. Fact number 114, reassigned. Growlithe was one of the first Pokemon to be given police dog status in the anime. Officer Jenny's use of Growlithe as a law enforcement partner across multiple Kanto episodes established an early precedent. Certain Pokemon are not just companions or combatants, but workers. They have jobs. They contribute to the maintenance of the world around them. Growlithe in this role is not diminished. It is dignified by the responsibility. Fact number 115, reassigned. The baby Pokemon Magby was originally planned to appear in Generation 1 alongside the other baby Pokemon, but the original Gold and Silver design document had so many creatures that the team had to cut some back. Magby was among those delayed. When it finally appeared in Gold and Silver, it fit so naturally with the Magmar line that most players assumed it had always been planned. The seams are invisible, much the Fire line simply felt incomplete without its baby form, and its arrival made it whole. Part 9. Hidden Mechanics and Competitive History. Behind the warmth of Fire-type's lore and design lies a surprisingly complex mechanical identity that has shifted significantly across the franchise's 30-year competitive history. Fact number 102. The move Fire Spin, one of the original 5 Fire-type moves in Generation 1, had a notably different mechanic in the early games. In Generation 1, Fire Spin was one of the trapping moves that kept the opponent in place for 2 to 5 turns while dealing damage each turn. But in Generation 1, while the opponent was trapped, they could not attack at all. This made Fire Spin genuinely broken in the original games, trapping opponents indefinitely through careful use. Thus, it was significantly nerfed in later generations to only deal a fraction of its damage and allow the trapped Pokemon to continue attacking. Fact number 103. The Sunny Day and Solar Beam combination became one of the defining strategic axes of competitive Pokemon in the early years of the games. Setting Sunny Day with one Pokemon, switching in a Fire-type or Chlorophyll user, and firing Solar Beams without the usual charge. Turn created powerful offensive momentum. This Sun Team structure remained relevant from Generation 2 through Generation 6, and influenced the design of numerous abilities and items specifically intended to counteract or support it. Fact number 104. The item Charcoal, which boosts the power of Fire-type moves by 20% when held, was introduced in Generation 2. The Flame Plate, which also boosts Fire-type moves by 20%, came later. The Fire Gem, introduced in Generation 5, provides a 30% boost but is consumed upon use. These items represent the material culture of Fire-type battling, the specific physical objects that trainers carry to give their Fire types an edge. Fact number 105. Choice Specs. Chandelure with Flash Fire is one of the most iconic offensive sets in competitive Pokemon history. The strategy involves switching Chandelure in on a predicted Fire-type move, activating Flash Fire for a 50% boost to its already extraordinary 145 special attack, then following up with a boosted Fire Blast or Overheat. The combination is capable of eliminating almost any Pokemon in a single hit. Fact number 106. Drought. The ability that summons harsh sunlight when the Pokemon enters battle was exclusive to Groudon in Generations 3 and 4. In Generation 5, Ninetales was given Drought as a irregular, non-hidden ability, transforming it from a mediocre competitive Pokemon into an indispensable Sun Team support. The change elevated Ninetales from near irrelevance to Uber's viability overnight, and the Fire and Fairy pairing that Drought Ninetales formed with Mega Charizard Y became one of the most feared offensive cores in the game. Fact number 107. The move Sacred Fire, Ho-Oh's signature attack for many generations, was not made available to any other Pokemon through Level Up until Generation 6. From Generation 6 onward, Entei can also learn Sacred Fire through the move Remember mechanic in games where that function exists. At the sharing of Ho-Oh's most sacred flame with Entei, the legendary beast that represents the fire of the burned tower, is one of those small mechanical decisions that deepens the mythology without drawing explicit attention to itself. Fact number 108. Blaze, the standard ability of all Fire-type starters, activates when the Pokemon is at 1/3 HP or less. boosting Fire-type move power by 50%. This makes every Fire-type starter more dangerous when near defeat, a comeback mechanic embedded directly into the class of Pokémon most players form their deepest bonds with. The starter that is dying fights the hardest. There is something almost unbearably human about that. Fact number 109. The move Overheat, introduced in Generation 3, deals massive fire damage but sharply drops the user's special attack by 2 stages afterward. This creates a fascinating strategic tension. You can hit once with enormous force, but the aftermath weakens all your subsequent fire attacks significantly. The move rewards decisive, aggressive play while punishing over-reliance. It is one of the few moves that changes the character of a Pokémon just by being in the moveset. Fact number 110. Will-O-Wisp, the signature status-inflicting move of the Fire type, was introduced in Generation 3 and has become one of the most used moves in competitive Pokémon at every level. It inflicts burn, which halves physical attack and chips away at health each turn. Its accuracy of 85% gives it exactly enough risk to be interesting. It turned defensive Fire types, particularly Rotom Heat and Sableye, into major pivot tools that could punish physical attackers by switching in and immediately threatening a burn. Part 10b. The Deeper Fire. Philosophy, memory, and what these creatures mean. There is something worth sitting with in the quiet before sleep about why the Fire type has always felt different. Not better than other types. Water has its depth, electric has its restlessness, ghost has its haunting, but different in a specific way that is hard to name without slowing down and feeling for it. Fire is the only element that is visibly alive. Watch a flame and you will see it breathe. It rises and falls. It responds to wind. It grows when it finds fuel and shrinks when it doesn't. It moves without a nervous system, without a brain, without intention. And yet no one has ever sat in front of a fire without feeling, in some wordless part of themselves, that something is alive there. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry. This is what fire actually does to the human nervous system, and it has been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years. When Game Freak designed the Fire type, they were not designing a strategic category. They were reaching into something ancient. They were saying, here are the creatures that carry that feeling. Here is the warmth in the dark. Here is the thing our ancestors circled when the night was cold and uncertain. Fact number supplemental 1. Entei's Pokédex entry in Pokémon Gold reads, it is said that a new Entei is born every time a volcano appears. There is no telling how many of them there are. The implications are staggering. Every volcano that has ever formed, on this Earth or in any world like it, created an Entei. Thousands of volcanoes have formed over geological time. The world in the fiction of Pokémon is full of Entei that no trainer has ever seen, running across grasslands we have never mapped, roaring into skies that have never been photographed. The world is larger than the game. The fire goes further than the story. Fact number supplemental 2. Ponyta's evolution into Rapidash happens at level 40, one of the higher evolution levels of any Pokémon that doesn't require special conditions. This means that most players who use Ponyta will spend significant time traveling with a small flame-maned horse before it becomes something that runs at 150 miles per hour. But the process of waiting, of choosing to keep using Ponyta through its awkward middle stages rather than releasing it for something more immediately powerful, is itself a lesson in patience that most players take without realizing they're taking it. Fact number supplemental 3. In the anime, Brock gave away his Vulpix to Suzy, the Pokémon breeder, in episode 168, Beauty and the Breeder. Vulpix had been one of his signature Pokémon, appearing in battles and contests and quiet moments throughout the original series. Its departure was handled with a lightness that honored the moment. Brock trusted Suzy to care for it better than he could. The fact that it was a Fire-type Pokémon being passed to someone who understood it more deeply mirrors the kitsune mythology of Vulpix. The fox is not owned. It chooses where to bestow its presence. Fact number supplemental 4. The 3 Fire-type starter Pokémon of Generations 3, 4, and 5, Blaziken, Infernape, and Emboar, all gained the Fighting type as their secondary. Each one draws from a different martial tradition. Blaziken from kickboxing and capoeira, Infernape from Chinese martial arts and specifically Kung Fu in the Sun Wukong tradition, and Emboar from the wrestling and weight-based fighting traditions associated with sumo and the Chinese general archetype. 3 generations of fire and fighting, each drawing from a distinct fighting culture. The pattern was intentional. The eventual break from it, with Delphox's fire and psychic typing, was equally intentional. Fact number, supplemental 5. The 3 Pokémon that lived and died in the burned tower, the unnamed creatures that Ho-Oh resurrected as Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, have never been identified. The games leave their original forms a mystery. Were they already Raikou, Entei, and Suicune before the fire? Or were they ordinary Pokémon transformed by Ho-Oh's power into something new? Different Pokédex entries and different game versions imply different things. The ambiguity is deliberate, and it sits at the center of one of the franchise's most resonant origin stories. 3 creatures died in a fire. 3 new creatures were born from it. The fire did not destroy them. It made them. Fact number, supplemental 6. Typhlosion, like all fully evolved fire-type starters, can use the move Eruption. But Typhlosion's relationship with Eruption feels more personal than Incineroar's relationship with Darkest Lariat or Blaziken's relationship with Blazikick. Typhlosion is a compact Pokémon. It stores an enormous amount of heat inside a body that doesn't look particularly large. The Eruption move is the release of all of that stored heat at once. It is the Pokémon letting go of everything it has been holding inside. There is a specific kind of relief implied in that. Fact number, supplemental 7. Ninetales can learn Nasty Plot in later generations, a move that doubles special attack through some form of devious scheming. The combination of Ninetales setting up Nasty Plot in Harsh Sunlight, with Solar Beam ready as coverage and Fire Blast or Flamethrower as primary offense, creates one of the most theoretically sound sweeping setups in the game. The visual of a nine-tailed divine fox spending a turn plotting is, in the context of kitsune mythology, absolutely precise. Scheming is what kitsune do. It is their nature. Fact number, supplemental 8. The Pokemon Charmander is the only starter from the original 3 whose flame, if extinguished, means death. Bulbasaur does not die if its bulb wilts. Squirtle does not die if it can't produce water. Charmander's flame is its heartbeat. It is the visible proof of life in a way that Bulbasaur's or Squirtle's essential features simply are not. This asymmetry gives Charmander a fragility that neither of its starter contemporaries shares, and a depth of investment from the player that goes beyond strategy. Keeping that flame alive is keeping the Pokemon itself alive. Fact number supplemental 9. The Pokemon Duskull, a ghost type, can learn Will-O-Wisp, the fire type status move. This is one of many instances of fire type moves crossing into the ghost type's thematic territory. The concept of ghostly fire, cold flames that do not warm, flames that are visible but not physical, appears in multiple folklore traditions under names like Foxfire, Ignis Fatuus, and Will-O-the-Wisp, from which the move takes its name directly. Will-O-the-Wisps are ghost lights in European folklore that lead travelers astray in marshes at night. The Pokemon move named after them inflicts burn, a wound from fire that should not be able to burn. It is, fittingly, impossible to explain. Fact number. Supplemental 10. The Pokemon Flame Body and Steam Engine abilities both create mechanical interactions where being hit by fire-type moves becomes beneficial rather than harmful. But this inversion, fire becoming fuel, is one of the more philosophically interesting gameplay patterns in the franchise. It reflects the principle in metallurgy and many other physical processes where subjecting a material to extreme heat makes it stronger. Steel is tempered, ceramics are fired, glass is formed. Fire transforms. For the right Pokemon, being hit by fire is not damage. It is refinement. Fact number, supplemental 11. Ho-Oh's appearance at the end of episode 1 of the anime, before it had even been officially revealed or named, created what may be the longest-running sense of mystery in the franchise's history. Western viewers of the original series, watching the dubbed English version, encountered that golden bird flying across a rainbow sky and were told nothing about what it was. There was no Pokédex entry. There was no name. Ash just said it was beautiful, and then the episode ended. That glimpse, that nameless golden firebird crossing a rainbow in the last few seconds of the very first episode, is the purest possible expression of what the fire type means in the deepest register of the franchise. It is the thing that is almost too beautiful to name, seen once and then gone. Fact number supplemental. 12. Arcanine's Pokédex entry in the original games describes it as being able to run 6,200 miles in just 24 hours. This would require a sustained speed of approximately 258 miles per hour. For a creature the size of a large dog, this is physically implausible by any real-world standard. But the Pokédex has never been particularly concerned with physical plausibility, and the number gives Arcanine a kind of mythological scale that its legendary designation makes sense of. It doesn't merely run fast, it runs at the speed of stories about things that run fast. Fact number supplemental. 13. The Litwick evolutionary line, Litwick, Lampent, and Chandelure, is sometimes described by fans as the dark triad of the Pokémon world. Litwick lures the innocent, Lampent searches for the sick and dying to absorb their souls. Chandelure burns spirits and traps them, preventing them from passing on. Each stage is darker than the last. The evolutionary progression of this fire and ghost line is not one of growth in the conventional sense, but of deepening commitment to a terrible purpose. And yet Chandelure is beautiful. It floats in old buildings, its flames dancing. And it looks like something that was made to decorate the night. Fact number supplemental 14. Game Freak's design team has repeatedly stated in interviews that the fire type was always meant to evoke a sense of passion and drive. The internal fire of a person who has found something to care about. The best fire-type Pokémon are not just strong or dangerous, they feel motivated. Charizard is proud, Incineroar is engaged, Ninetales is intent. Even quiet Pokémon like Cyndaquil, who moves softly through the world until threatened and then ignites completely, embody a specific emotional truth. The difference between a person at rest and a person who has been given a reason. The fire is the reason. Fact number supplemental. 15. In the closing moments of Pokémon I Choose You, the reboot film of the first episode, a Ho-Oh drops a golden feather as it flies overhead. This feather, symbolic of blessings bestowed upon the pure of heart in the game's lore, is the reason Ash begins his journey. Without that feather, without that fleeting encounter with a creature that burned like a sunset in motion, there would be no story. The entire franchise in that film's telling begins with a single fire-type legendary dropping one feather from an enormous height and a child picking it up and deciding it meant something. Most great stories start that way. A small flame offered to someone willing to carry it. All of this, every fact, every bit of lore, every mechanical detail, every piece of mythological archaeology, comes back to the same place. Fire has meaning because it was the first thing humanity decided was worth protecting, worth gathering around, and worth staying up for. The fire type of Pokémon carries that inheritance in every Pokédex entry, every ability name, every move animation. It is not just a strategic category, it is an element. And elements don't argue, they don't perform, they simply are. And tonight, as you settle into the warmth of wherever you are, I hope you carry something of that with you. A small flame. Something that doesn't go out. Fact number 111. Fire-type cards in the original Pokémon trading card game were among the most powerful in the early sets. Charizard's first printing in the base set from 1999 had an attack called Fire Spin that dealt 100 damage, one of the highest damage values in the game at the time. It required discarding 2 energy cards to use, a significant cost, but the raw power was nearly unmatched. Watch the base set Charizard holographic rare became the most sought-after card in the game, and original near-mint copies have sold at auction for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Fact number 112. A base set Charizard in PS, a 10, the highest possible grading condition, sold at auction in 2021 for $311,800. A first edition PSA 10 Charizard sold for $420,000 in the same year. These prices reflect not just the scarcity of the card in pristine condition, but the emotional weight it carries. This single fire-type Pokémon on a small piece of cardboard became a symbol of an entire childhood and an entire cultural moment. Fact number 113. The Ancient Mew promo card, distributed at theaters during the second Pokémon movie in 2000, was printed with text in a pseudo-runic font meant to look like an ancient language. Many younger players genuinely could not tell if it was real or a prop. The card depicted Mew, and while Mew is not a fire type, the card was distributed alongside promotional fire type Pokémon materials and became part of the cultural mythology of the franchise at the height of its power. Fact number 114. In the Pokémon trading card game, fire-type cards are generally weak to water and have no resistances in most sets. The lack of resistance is unusual compared to other types. Water, for instance, typically resists fire. But the TCG made a design choice to keep fire-type cards focused purely on high offense without the defensive mitigation that resistances provide. Fire cards burn bright and fast. Fact number 115. Magmar was Blaine's signature Pokémon in the original anime's Cinnabar Island arc. Blaine, the Cinnabar gym leader, was a volcanic personality. He ran his gym as a trivia quiz, and if you failed, you had to fight one of his Pokémon without rest. His Magmar used Fire Blast to devastating effect, and the battle with Ash took place in an active volcano. The visuals of Ash and Pikachu fighting in a cavern of lava and fire against a Pokémon born from that same geological fury remain some of the most atmospherically striking images in the original anime. Fact number 116. In the anime, Ash's Charizard became disobedient after evolving, refusing to battle and often turning its fire on Ash himself. This storyline ran for most of the first 2 seasons of the anime and reflected a genuine aspect of the games. In Generation 1 and 2, Pokémon that were traded to you or obtained in certain ways would occasionally disobey if your gym badge count wasn't high enough. The anime adapted this game mechanic into the most memorable character arc of the original series. Charizard's eventual submission and friendship with Ash, cemented in the Charizard Chills episode, is one of the most emotionally resonant moments in the franchise's long history. Fact number 117, the anime episode that first showed Ho-Oh, the very first episode before any Generation 2 promotional material had even been released, was so early that the animation team was working from preliminary sketches. Ho-Oh's design had not been finalized when the episode aired. The golden rainbow bird that Ash sees in that first episode does not perfectly match the finalized Ho-Oh design that appeared in the games. It is slightly different, a sketch of a legendary, a suggestion of the divine seen through a child's eyes before the world has named it. Fact number 118. Entei's role in the third Pokémon movie, Spell of the Unknown, was not Entei at all. The creature in the film is a construct made by the Unknown, a fake Entei created from a young girl's wish to have her own Entei. This simulated legendary was powerful enough to kidnap Ash's mother and transform the world around it. The real Entei was never directly involved. The film poses a quietly disturbing question. If an imitation of something sacred is powerful enough to reshape reality, does the difference between the real and the constructed matter? Fact number 119. The anime's portrayal of fire-type moves consistently makes them more dramatic than their game equivalents. Flamethrower in the games is a reliable mid-tier attack. Flamethrower in the anime is a roaring column of fire that scorches the landscape for 100 yards. The games make fire-type powerful. The anime makes it feel genuinely elemental. Fact number 120. In the Pokémon Adventures manga, often considered the most faithful adaptation of the game's dark implied lore, fire-type Pokémon appear more frequently in genuinely threatening contexts than in the anime. The manga is written for an older demographic and does not shy away from consequences. A Magmar being used in an attack sequence is not played for excitement the way the anime would. It is depicted as a genuinely dangerous creature wielding genuinely destructive power. Part 11. Curiosities, hidden details, and the strange corners of the fire type. Fact number 121. The move. Inferno, introduced in Generation 5, is a fire-type move with a base power of 100 and 100% accuracy for inflicting a burn. The move always burns its target if it hits. Its actual accuracy of only 50% makes it one of the most gambling moves in the game. Enormous power, certain burn, but a coin flip on whether it lands. Inferno is the move for trainers who believe in dramatic moments rather than reliable statistics. Fact number 122. Fire-type Pokémon are the mascot type for the Chinese zodiac in the Pokémon franchise. The connection runs deep. Cyndaquil is the rat, small, quick, fire-generating. Ponyta is the horse. Tepig is the pig. Torchic is the rooster. Chimchar is the monkey. Game Freak has drawn on zodiac iconography in nearly every fire starter they have designed. Fact number 123 Fuecoco, the Generation 9 Firestarter, has a forehead design that is shaped like a flame, which has led to wide discussion about whether it is based on a jalapeno, a small tomato, or simply a generically tropical fruit. The Pokédex confirms it is based on a crocodile and the concept of the heat that builds up inside spicy peppers. The capsaicin in a pepper is a defense mechanism, and the burning sensation it causes is not actually a temperature change, but a misfiring of heat receptors. Fuecoco is fire that is technically an illusion. Fact number 124. Pyroar, the fire and normal type lion. Pokémon introduced in Generation 6 has a notable dimorphism between male and female forms. Male Pyroar has a magnificent flaming mane that covers most of its head. Female Pyroar has a smaller flame on the top of its head, but a striped pattern on its body that makes it visually distinct. The female Pyroar is also described as the leader of the Pride in the Wild, protecting the group, while males look after the cubs, a reversal of the typical lion social dynamic that players tend to expect. Fact number 125. The move Searing Shot, Victini's signature fire-type move, has a base power of 130% burn chance. Victini, the Victory Pokémon, is the first mythical Pokémon of Generation 5 and carries the strange lore that any trainer with Victini by their side will always be victorious. Its other signature fire-type move, V-Create, has a base power of 180, the highest base power of any fire-type move, but lowers the user's defense, special defense, and speed by one stage each. V-Create is the most extreme expression of the fire-type philosophy. Absolute consuming power that costs everything else. Fact number 126. Darmanitan's Zen mode, triggered when it drops below half health, transforms it into a blue, meditative statue-like form. In this form, its attack and speed drop dramatically, but its special attack and special defense skyrocket. It also gains the Psychic type. This is a reference to Bodhidharma's legendary meditation at Shaolin Temple, the monk who sat facing a wall for 9 years until his legs atrophied. Darmanitan in Zen mode is a creature that has lost its physical capability, but gained extraordinary mental clarity. It is still dangerous, just in a completely different way. Fact number 127. Galarian Darmanitan, introduced in Generation 8, is an ice type with an ability that, when it drops below half health, increases its attack stat and makes all of its physical moves that have perfect accuracy. This form is entirely Arctic, white, snowy, carrying a ball of ice where the fire used to be. The contrast between Unnovan Darmanitan, volcanic energy, Buddhist fire, and Galarian Darmanitan, Arctic stillness, a pure force, is one of the most visually dramatic regional form contrasts in the franchise. Fact number 128. The Pokemon Pansear and Simisear, the Unova fire-type monkeys, are part of an elemental monkey trio that mirrors the 3 starter types. Panpour and Simipour represent water, Pansage and Simisage represent grass, and Pansear and Simisear represent fire. They are given to the player early in Black and White as a counter-type to whichever starter was chosen. If you chose the grass-type Snivy, your neighbor gives you Pansear. If you chose the fire-type Tepig, you get Panpour. If you chose the water-type Oshawott, you get Pansage. It is one of the franchise's most elegant expressions of the starter triangle. Fact number 129, Simisear. Despite being one of the elemental monkeys and appearing in the early game, holds the dubious distinction of being one of the least popular Pokemon in the franchise according to a global popularity poll conducted by the Pokémon Company. In a poll asking players to vote for their favorite Pokemon from all generations, Simisear received the fewest votes of any Pokemon. There is something quietly poignant about that. A creature made of fire and warmth, forgotten by the very people it was designed to help. Fact number 130. The move Fiery Dance, Volcarona's signature move, has a 50% chance to raise Volcarona's special attack by 1 stage every time it is used. This self-buffing attack means that Volcarona becomes more dangerous the longer a battle goes on. Combined with Quiver Dance, which raises special attack, special defense, and speed, all at once, Volcarona in a favorable matchup can reach levels of offensive power that become genuinely unstoppable. The animation of fiery dance in the games, Volcarona spinning in a vortex of embers, is one of the most beautiful move animations in the franchise. Part 12. The Final Embers. Closing facts and the spirit of the fire type. Fact number 131. The Pokemon Heatran is the only legendary Pokemon that can be male or female with an equal probability. Most legendary Pokemon are genderless. Heatran's gender flexibility reflects its role as a creator, a geological force that exists at the intersection of the living and the elemental, capable of passing its fire from one generation to the next. Fact number 132, the move Flame Wheel. Introduced in Generation 2, was originally one of the few physical fire-type moves available. Before the physical/special split, this was meaningful. Arcanine could use Flame Wheel as a contact move that also had a chance to melt freeze status. The move's primary mechanical purpose in early competitive play was as a freeze cure. If your Pokemon was frozen, Flame Wheel would thaw it automatically. Fact number 133. Magby can be obtained by hatching an egg from Magmar in gold and silver, but there is a subtle detail in the Pokédex entries that most players miss. Magby's description says it hatches only in volcanic areas, near geothermal heat. The egg requires warmth that the natural world provides. Even the breeding process for these creatures is bound to fire. Fact number 134. The Pokemon Coalossal, a rock and fire type introduced in Generation 8, is a massive coal mine given form. Its body is made of compressed coal, and it burns its own substance to generate heat and power. Coalossal's design is deliberately industrial. It does not draw from mythology the way Ninetales or Volcarona does. It draws from the coal era, from the furnaces and factories of the Industrial Revolution. It is a Pokemon that embodies the fire that built the modern world. Fact number 135. Carkol and Rolicoli, Coalossal's pre-evolutions, are a coal cart and a lump of coal respectively. They are among the most aggressively mundane designs in the fire type's history. Rolicoli, the smallest, is literally just a rock with a single glowing orange eye and a chunk of coal on its body. Its description says it rolls around mine shafts and uses its single eye to navigate the darkness. There is something charming about the simplicity. Not every fire type needs to be mythological. Some of them are just useful. Fact number 136. Blacephalon, the Ultra Beast fire type introduced in Generation 7's Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, is one of the most unsettling Pokemon ever designed. It is described as an Ultra Beast from another dimension that travels the world juggling and then suddenly detonating its own head. The explosion does not destroy it, and it simply regenerates a new head. Blacephalon has the highest special attack of any non-mega evolved fire type, 151. It is a firework that cannot be extinguished, and a creature that destroys itself for the pleasure of the flash. Fact number 137. Oricorio's Bailey style, found on Ula Ula Island in Alola, is a fire and flying type Pokemon, whose dance is based on flamenco. This is one of the most specific cultural references in fire type history. Flamenco is a Spanish art form with deep roots in Romani and Moorish music traditions, characterized by passionate rhythmic footwork, precise hand gestures, and an emotional intensity that builds to a point of release. Oricorio's Bailey style moves with that same restrained ferocity, controlled fire, beauty, and the almost explosion. Fact number 138. The ability Steam Engine, introduced in Generation 8, sharply raises the holder's speed when hit by a fire-type or water-type move. This ability was designed specifically for Coalossal and its pre-evolutions. Coal-powered trains run faster when more heat and steam are applied. The mechanic of being hit by fire and becoming more dangerous as a result echoes Flashfire's principle. Fire-type Pokemon and their environment are made more powerful by the very thing that should threaten them. Fact number 139. Skeledirge, the final evolution of Fuecoco, has a Pokédex entry that describes it singing to protect its territory. The ghostly bird on its head, made of flame, is described as a companion spirit that merged with Skeledirge rather than a separate creature. The Pokemon and its Flamebird exist together in a state that is not quite one entity and not quite two. This ambiguity, the fire type blurring the boundary between self and companion, between the living and the spectral, is one of the most philosophically interesting places the franchise has reached. Fact number 140. Fuecoco's English name contains the word fuego, the Spanish word for fire. Its Pokédex entry describes a process where it absorbs the heat of its environment through small cells on its back and converts that absorbed warmth into fire energy. Fuecoco does not generate fire from within. It gathers fire from the warmth around it. This makes it different from almost every other fire-type Pokémon in the franchise. It is not a producer, but a collector, a small crocodile who gathers up the ambient heat of a warm afternoon and turns it into something beautiful. Fact number 141. Hisuian Arcanine, the regional variant of Arcanine introduced in Pokémon Legends. Arceus is a fire and rock type. This type combination is genuinely unusual. Fire and rock shares only Mag Cargo, and Mag Cargo is far less dignified. Hisuian Arcanine has thick gray fur instead of orange, stone-like protrusions on its legs, and a more rugged, archaic design that feels like an older, harder version of the Proud Guardian. Its typing reflects a Sinnoh landscape that is much more geological, hard volcanic rock, instead of the fertile plains that Cantonian Arcanine runs across. Fact number 142. Hisuian Typhlosion, as mentioned earlier, is fire and ghost. The change is explained by the ancient environment of the Hisui region. In the past, the boundary between the world of the living and the spirit world was less clearly defined. Typhlosion in this time and place absorbed the spiritual energy of the environment around it, becoming partly spectral. Its appearance is pallid and delicate rather than the robust orange and blue of the standard form. It looks like a creature that has been somewhere the living shouldn't go and come back a little different. Fact number 143. The Great Tusk and Sandy Shock's Paradox Pokemon introduced in Scarlet are noted for not having fire types among them except for Gouging Fire. This relative scarcity of fire type among the Paradox Pokemon created discussion among the fanbase about whether the fiery landscape of Paldea and its volcanic areas were being undertreated in terms of creature design. Whether that perceived absence was intentional remains unclear. Fact number 144. Delphox, the final evolution of Fennekin, uses a burning stick as a magical implement. The Pokédex says it gazes into the flames to see the future. This is a genuine magical practice from multiple human traditions. Scrying using fire is documented in West African, Middle Eastern, and European magic traditions as a way of gaining prophetic visions. The specific act of looking into flames and seeing what is coming is one of the oldest acts of divination in human history. Delphox performs it by looking into its own fire, which is a beautifully introspective image. Fact number 145. Chandelure has a base speed of only 80, which is relatively low for an offensive Pokémon of its power. This means that in competitive play, Chandelure often needs to be paired with speed-boosting items, moves, or abilities to function effectively. Trick Room, a move that makes slower Pokémon go first, is a common companion strategy for Chandelure, letting it wade into battle in its own time, in its own slow-burning way, and then destroying everything it reaches. Fact number 146. The move Firestorm does not exist in official Pokémon games, despite countless players from the early years believing it did. In the pre-internet era, rumors of moves, items, and Pokémon spread through playgrounds, school buses, and photocopied fake game guides. Firestorm was one of the most persistent of these playground myths, supposedly a move that hit all Pokémon on the field and set the weather on fire. It never existed. Yeah, but the fact that children invented it says something beautiful about what they wanted from fire-type moves, something that consumed everything at once and left no corner of the world untouched. Fact number 147. Ponyta and Rapidash received Galarian variants in Generation 8 that are neither fire-type nor connected to fire in any way. Galarian Ponyta is a psychic type based on unicorn mythology, and Galarian Rapidash is psychic and fairy. This was one of the more unexpected regional variant choices, taking a Pokémon that had been defined by its fire main since 1996 and removing the fire entirely. Fans were divided on whether this was an elegant reimagining or a loss of something essential. But the choice underscored how powerful the non-fire version of the design could be when liberated from its original element. Fact number 148, the Pokemon Embor, the final form of Tepig, has the highest base HP of any fire-type starter. Final evolution at 110. It is also the heaviest fire-type starter final evolution. Embor is a massive, bearded boar warlord wearing a ring of flames around its neck like a collar or a mantle. It is based on the pig general Zhu Baji from Journey to the West, the same mythological source that inspired the Chimchar line. Two different Pokemon from different generations drawing from the same story, telling different parts of it. Fact number 149. Charizard's Gigantamax form, introduced in Pokemon Sword and Shield, transforms it into an enormous version of itself with a star-shaped pattern of fire visible in the flame on the tip of its tail. Gigantamax Charizard is the partner, Pokemon of Leon, the champion of Galar, and its presence in the late game of Sword and Shield was deliberately designed to create a sense of encountering something enormous and almost overwhelming, a dragon that isn't a dragon at its most genuinely draconic. Fact number 150. In Pokemon Masters X, the mobile game that assembles Pokemon trainers from across all regions, several fire-type specialists are coded with unique dialogue that references the specific qualities of their fire types. Blaine's Magmar references the geological connection to Cinnabar's volcanic island. Flint's Infernape references the Sinnoh region's unusual fire-type scarcity and his pride in having one of the few flames in a region of cold mountains. Now, these small dialogue fragments are easy to miss, but reward players who explore the game deeply. Fact number 151. The relationship between Charizard and Ash in the anime took nearly 2 full seasons to resolve. From the moment Charmeleon evolved into Charizard in episode 46 of the original series, Charizard refused to obey Ash. It slept during battles. It turned on Ash with attacks. It cost Ash battles in tournaments. The arc was resolved in the 105th episode, Charizard Chills, when Ash spent an entire night keeping Charizard warm after it was frozen solid by a Pokemon in an orange island. Ash sitting through a cold night, rubbing heat back into his Charizard's limbs, refusing to leave, refusing to give up, is the moment the relationship turns. The flame of disobedience becomes the flame of loyalty because a 10-year-old boy refuses to let his fire go out. Fact number 152. Fire-type Pokemon have appeared on the cover art or promotional material of 5 main series Pokemon games. Charizard on Pokemon Red, Entei on Pokemon Gold and Heart Gold, Reshiram on Pokemon White, Yveltal on Pokemon Y, though Yveltal is dark and flying, and a Ho-Oh silhouette on Pokemon Gold's box. Fire has been front and center in the franchise's presentation of itself since the very beginning. Fact number 153. The move Mystical Fire, introduced in Generation 6, is one of the most mechanically unusual fire-type moves. It deals special fire damage and always lowers the target's special attack by 1 stage. It is the only fire-type move that is both offensive and stat debuffing simultaneously. It was introduced specifically for Generation 6 and remains one of the rarest fire-type moves by usage in competitive play, though it found a home on certain support Pokemon who benefit from weakening special attackers. Fact number 154. Volcanion's ability to create steam at such high pressure that it can demolish mountains is described in detail across multiple Pokédex entries. The mechanics of Volcanion's body are genuinely unusual. It absorbs water from the environment and then combines it with its internal fire to produce massive steam explosions. Unlike most fire types, which produce fire as a direct biological output, Volcanion produces steam as the product of a reaction. Now, its body is less like a furnace and more like a boiler, a system of conversion rather than generation. Fact number 155. Torracat, the second form of Litten, has a bell on its neck that rings when the flame inside its body grows stronger. The bell itself is not external. It is a part of Torracat's body, grown from the intense heat of the fire sac in its chest. The image of a cat whose heartbeat is a bell, ringing louder as the fire inside it grows, is one of the most quietly beautiful pieces of Pokemon design in the recent generations. Fact number 156. Fire type. Pokemon immune to burns include every Pokemon with the fire type, Pokemon with the water veil or magma armor abilities, and certain situations involving specific held items. Among all these, A fire-type immunity is the most absolute. It cannot be stripped by a type change that doesn't actually occur, and it remains intact as long as the Pokémon retains its fire typing. It is one of the few unconditional immunities in the game. Fact number 157. Magcargo has an in-game shell made of hardened magma. The shell cracks easily because it is cooled lava, not solid rock, technically a glass-like substance rather than a true mineral. Real-world volcanic glass, obsidian, forms the same way. Magma that cools too quickly to form crystals hardens into something brittle and sharp. Magcargo's shell is one of the more geologically accurate details in the entire Pokémon franchise. Fact number 158. Flareon's fur, described in the Pokédex as storing thermal energy, can reach approximately 1,650 degrees Fahrenheit at its surface when fully heated. This makes Flareon one of the hottest fire-type Pokémon by surface temperature on a pound-for-pound basis. Despite being the smallest of the three original offensive evolutions, Flareon has a temperature that dwarfs steel smelters and most industrial furnaces. It is, in its quiet, fluffy way, one of the most extreme creatures in the franchise. Fact number 159. The community of competitive Pokémon players has over 30 years developed a rich lexicon around fire types. A fire starter describes any team that uses a fire type as its primary offensive foundation. A sunsetter refers to a Pokémon with drought, or a player who uses Sunny Day to support fire-type teammates. Fire spam describes teams that lean heavily on fire coverage to break through steel and grass-type walls. This vocabulary reflects how deeply the fire type has embedded itself, not just in the game's mechanics, but in the culture that has grown around those mechanics. Fact number 158. B. Houndoom was given a Mega Evolution in Generation 6. Mega Houndoom gains a significant boost to its already strong special attack, and its Sun-amplified fire moves become genuinely fearsome. But the Mega Stone for Houndoom, the Houndoominite, can only be obtained in Pokémon Y, not X, making it a version-exclusive Mega Evolution. This mirrors the original generation's pairing of Hounder as a version exclusive in Gold and Silver. Some Pokémon carry their scarcity across generations, like a family trait. Fact number 159. B. Slugma and Magcargo are the only fire-type Pokémon explicitly described as being in danger if they stop moving. Most fire-type Pokémon generate their fire internally and maintain it whether active or resting. Slugma's fire is external. It is the fire. If the lava cools, the creature is gone. This creates an unusual life strategy. Slugma cannot rest. It cannot pause. It is a creature defined entirely by motion, by the perpetual act of continuing to exist through continuous forward movement. There is something philosophically loaded about a creature for whom stopping is dying. Fact number 159. C. Reshiram and Zekrom, the mascot legendaries of Pokémon Black and White, represent a duality that was explicitly described by Game Freak as being about truth and ideals. Reshiram, the fire-type dragon of truth, fights for those who seek truth, while Zekrom, the electric-type dragon of ideals, fights for those who pursue their dreams. The specific pairing of fire with truth is philosophically interesting. Fire in many traditions is associated with revelation, with the burning away of falsehood, with the alchemical process of refining base metal into gold by subjecting it to extreme heat. Truth in this framing is what remains after the fire has taken everything that was unnecessary. Fact number 159. D. The animation for Charizard's flamethrower attack in Pokémon Stadium on the Nintendo 64 was, at the time of its release, considered one of the most impressive pieces of creature animation in any video game. The smooth, fluid rendering of a winged, fire-breathing creature was genuinely new in 1998 and 1999. Children who saw it in motion for the first time at friends' houses and in stores described it as the moment Pokémon felt real to them. Not the sprite on the Game Boy screen, but the fully realized, three-dimensional creature they had always imagined. Fact number 159. E. The design of Incineroar specifically references the Rudo archetype in Lucha Libre Wrestling, the villain character who deliberately draws boos from the crowd and takes enjoyment in doing so. Incineroar's flames activate through the friction of its attacks, and its Pokédex says that if its trainer makes it fight a half-hearted battle, its flames weaken. Incineroar will not perform for someone who doesn't care. It only burns when the stakes are real. There is something intensely relatable about a creature that refuses to perform when the conditions are wrong and catches fire when the moment demands it. Fact number 159. F. The Pokemon Victini, the mythical Pokemon of Generation 5, carries a V-shaped marking on its forehead that represents victory. Its signature moves, V-Create and Searing Shot, are the two most powerful Fire-type moves in the franchise by base power, 180 and 100 respectively. Victini's lore says that any trainer carrying it will never lose. But the concept of a Fire-type Pokemon as a symbol of absolute guaranteed victory, not because of strength, but because of something more like blessing or fortune, places it in the tradition of divine fire myths where the flame is not destructive but sustaining. Fact number 159. The Fire type and the Dragon type share the distinction of having the fewest non-damaging moves, 3 each. This parallel is interesting given how frequently Fire and Dragon are paired. Ho-Oh is fire and flying but tied to a dragon mythology. Charizard is fire and flying but looks like a dragon. Reshiram is fire and dragon. The two types circle each other through the history of the franchise, each influencing the other's identity like two flames spiraling together without quite merging. Fact number 159. H. Heatran, as a legendary Pokemon, has one of the most unusual competitive roles of any creature in that tier. It is almost entirely defined by utility. It can check fairy types, set up stealth rocks, spin off opposing hazards with rapid spin in some formats, absorb fire-type moves with flash fire, and act as a pivot that forces opponents into difficult decisions. Heatran is less a weapon and more a presence, a geological constant that opponents must plan around. It embodies its own lore in this way, not a creature of drama, but of slow, deep heat. Fact number 159. E. The Pokemon Camerupt gained a Mega Evolution in Generation 6 that sees the volcanoes on its back grow enormous, erupting with superheated magma. A Mega Camerupt is so slow that it has a base speed of 20, which is one of the lowest in the game, but its special attack reaches 145, and its signature ability, Sheer Force, removes the secondary effects of moves, but increases their power by 30%. The result is a Pokemon that cannot dodge anything, cannot outrun anything, but when it hits with the force of a geological event. It is a volcanic mountain, given mobility and attitude. Fact number 159. J. In the Pokemon anime's Sun and Moon series, Ash's Litten evolved into Torracat after a battle with Kukui's Incineroar. This evolution happened in a context where Torracat had been struggling to defeat the very form it would eventually become. The narrative of a Fire-type Pokemon watching its future self and choosing to grow toward it is one of those quiet moments where the anime's best instincts, storytelling through implication rather than statement, shine through completely. And finally, fact number 160. Every Fire-type Pokemon in the franchise shares one thing that no mechanic or stat line can capture. When you first encountered the one that mattered to you, whether it was the Charmander you chose on a Tuesday afternoon in your bedroom in 1998, or the Cyndaquil you picked up on a long car ride, or the Fuecoco your child chose last year, there was a moment where you looked at a small creature made of light and warmth, and you felt something. Not strategy, not competitive advantage, something older than that. But the same thing our ancestors felt when they gathered around an open fire in the dark, when they told stories in the warmth and let the night hold them gently. Something that said, this is where we belong, this is safe, this is home. Fire doesn't ask anything of you, it just burns. Quietly, steadily, beautifully. And now, so can you. If you made it this far, I hope you're drifting somewhere comfortable, somewhere warm. If you're still awake and you enjoyed this journey through the Fire type, please subscribe so you never miss one of these. Leave a like if the warmth found you tonight. And if there's a Fire-type Pokemon that holds a special place for you, a specific starter, a specific moment, a specific Pokédex entry that made you feel something, leave it in the comments. I read every single one. Take care of yourselves out there. Stay warm, and I'll see you for the next one. Good night.